Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Gomez, and I'm here to welcome you to another TechCheck Plus live stream. Joining me today, I have Alina Vandenberghe. She is the Chief Experience Officer and co-founder of tech startup Chili Piper, as well as Raj Burman, who is the CEO of Techfugees. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what tech is doing to aid the refugee crisis in Ukraine, but also the refugee crisis at large. So just to get started, Alina, I would love to turn to you just to sort of kick things off and explain to us. I mean, just looking at some of the things that Chili Piper and Techfugees have done in Ukraine. I mean, resources for people fleeing Ukraine in an 89-page Google document, helping over 100,000 refugees, Chili Piper making donations to raise over $200,000 in capital to help community-based organizations that are on the ground. I mean, fill in the gaps for me. What's the latest in terms of those initiatives?
We have put ourselves immediately in the shoes of those that have been displaced in Ukraine, because we have employees in there. I also have friends that have been affected by it. And I was doing this initially just to help those that were in immediate need. But then I realized that this was a much greater scale than I anticipated. I had worked with Raj at Techfugees before on refugees initiatives, so I was aware of the deep need that people that are just disrupted from their normal lives. So I had a bit of experience with that, but at the same time, I just want to do more, and I want to make sure that I can do everything that I can in my power as a tech company to be able to put a stop on this nonsensical act that's happening now in Ukraine and in other regions as well.
So before I dive into specifically what Chili Piper is doing, I mean, Raj, can you give us a little bit more context too? Alina says she's worked with you in the past in terms of other, refugee crises as well. What exactly is the state of the crisis in Ukraine? What are we seeing? How does it scale? Perhaps maybe compared to some other situations that you've either seen in your tenure as CEO or with your work in this community.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here. Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with Alina over the years with Chili Piper on this issue. Ukraine is one of many big events, and we've seen, since the time I've been with Techfugees, the nature of human displacement is proliferating. Currently 1% of the planet, 84 million, is currently displaced. In the course of, we're now day 26 now in Ukraine. Within the last 20 days, Brandon, we've got 3 million people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, who have fled the country. Another 2 million people are displaced internally. That's a huge number within a very short space of time. And so, we've seen similar sort of events happening in other countries like Lebanon and in Syria crisis with Afghanistan and so forth. But the underlying denominator is the power of the collective. And the reason why Techfugees has come together as an international nonprofit is leveraging the power of the collective of the digital tech community, together with volunteers and cross-sector organizations, to come together to really galvanize and support for these people who are displaced right now. So currently, right now, since the Ukraine crisis, we've mobilized well over 50 action groups across Europe, primarily with close to about 3,000 people right now in those countries on very specific issues, supporting technical assistance. We're also lots of people coordinating with the local NGOs on the ground in terms of providing the humanitarian support for those people who are displaced from Ukraine right now. So it's all hands to the pump as we're trying to help those people to safety at the moment.
And I know that you have very specific calls to action as things are needed. I mean, what is the role that tech is playing right now? I mean, what is the specific need? What is the ask of tech and of the tech community and of tech leaders right now to aid in what's happening over in Ukraine? I'll ask you that question, Raj.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing at the moment is matching those needs on the grounds with those people who can offer assistance. So Alina and myself, we very quickly galvanized the community to highlight where those needs are and creating the community to highlight where the offers are. So there's a matching process right now and coordinating those efforts worldwide on the ground. But the most immediate need, I mean, right now, the real grassroots needs right now is getting power banks, power empowering those individuals, predominantly women who are, traveling on the roads. For example, just a few weeks ago in Lviv, which is 70 kilometers from the borders of Poland, we've got women and children and elderly walking that distance. That's equivalent to walking from Smithtown and Long Island to New York, right? And that's a massive distance. And you can imagine, getting your power, getting connected on your mobile devices is a big thing. So one of the things we've orchestrated, we've teamed up with an organization called Lifesaver, which offers pre-charged power banks. We've already deployed 2,000 of those. We need more help on the ground. We're fundraising right now. There's an emergency call to action to get more of these power banks in the hands of those people right now at the borders, and we're working on that front right now. The third thing we're really mindful of is the aspects of human trafficking. We're seeing an emergence of that within the last 24, 48 hours. We're seeing human trafficking rings being bust with women and children and kids being kidnapped. And so one of the things we're looking with the digital tech communities around empowering sort of ID verification, so that those people on the ground can actually got information in their hands to know exactly who they are and their trusted connections, as it were. So those are the key things that we're currently driving at the moment at the ground.
So, and then, what is the gap between the need and the supply that you currently have right now, right? You're saying, Raj, that you need power banks to literally enable access to the technology. How much need is there? And like I said, how much supply do you actually have?
Yeah, so at the moment, 2,000 have been sent. We need to send millions more. There's a crowdfunding campaign right now which we're working together with Chili Piper on that front, and together with Lifesaver. The real aspect of this is there's a coordination and knowledge sharing with the local NGOs, and with the collective, what we're doing is bringing that trusted information in a uniform way so that information is available. And a good example of that is the document that we've curated with Chili Piper to kind of aggregate those information sources, which are trusted information sources, which is becoming invaluable for helping those people on the ground and getting access to quick information. Literally, people are being saved by that one document, which has been created very early on. So really, right now, we are now dispensing that, and we've got some technology to kind of signpost and enable wayfinding, safe routes for those individuals on the ground, so they can get access to these power banks on the ground.
I want to talk about the doc, because I think that's sort of been a bit of a headline feature. And Alina, I'll talk to you about this. The Google Doc. I mean, it's an 86-page document. What exactly is it allowing? What information is it relaying? And can you just tell us a little bit more about how you've employed almost the simplicity of something that so many people use on a daily basis to really help, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees?
At the beginning, we just looked at what their options were as they were fleeing off Ukraine. What were the routes? What were the safe routes? Where were the shortest lines? What were the paths to get there? What bus would go there? What train would go there? And that was the beginning. Then we realized, okay, once they cross the border, they need some fast access to a place where they can take a shower, they can decompress. So having access to a free shelter, or even having access to their cash was difficult at the beginning. They couldn't use their local currency to pay for things. So we put that as a main headline. You have to do this and that in order to access your cash. Then we looked at, okay, now they cross the border. They might have crossed the border in Romania or in Poland, but they have friends in Portugal, or they have some hope that they could get a visa in UK and work there. What are the requirements? What documents do they need? Where do they need to go? On which website? How do they get a job? How can they apply for a job immediately, because they need to survive, right? And it's not clear for how long they need to stay outside of the country. Some of them, they think it's just going to be temporary, that they're going to get back in a few weeks, so they just find shelter on the border. Some of them are less optimistic, and they say, okay, we might be gone for a while now. And it's a little bit different for everybody, but we wanted to make sure that each step is covered. obviously these are the 4 million that are exiting the country, but then there are the people that are still in the country that are still being displaced, the 6 million more. And you can imagine a quarter of the country cannot know where to hide, doesn't know where they're going to access food from. They're getting injured. The trauma that they're going through, just the emotional trauma, I can testify for that because I've gone through some things similar in the experience in the revolution in Romania. But these are people that are going through some very tough times, and it's not only the people that are crossing the border that are going through very hard times, it's also people that are being displaced internally. And for those, the needs are more related to food, water, medical supplies, and just basic things to find a place where they're not going to get bombed. And that's the difficult part, because you don't know where Russia is going to hit and where the military is going to decide that it's a target, and it seems to be quite random. So that thought of randomness, that you're not finding a place that's safe right now, it's hard.
I want to talk about that personal experience that you're touching on, because I do sort of see it as a catalyst for why you want to make sure that it is a top priority at Chili Pipers, right? That it is something that is ingrained in the company. I mean, you have your Citizens of Our Planet, branch as well, and all the work that you're doing there, Alina. I mean, how personal does this also feel in terms of your own experiences, and is that the motivator behind why you feel so compelled to be involved in these refugee crises?
So I've gone through communism in Romania, which is a similar period to what Russia is going through right now, where information is not free. People are not free to speak up, and I've gone through that, where our neighbor would monitor every word that my parents would say, that even us as children would say. We could not criticize the regime, we could not say certain things. Everything had to be positive towards the dictator at that time. And I've learned to appreciate a lot when I came to US, that kind of freedom to be able to just express what you're going through. And we take that for granted here in US because we've never been on the other side. But it's a powerful feeling when you land here and you realize the freedom of speech and the freedom of information that's available. That's huge. That's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is when you've gone through your entire life, where the thing that you worry about is whether you have not the right filter on social media, is going to not make you so understanding of the trauma that's going through on the other side. But when you go through something as disruptive as bullets flying through above your head, or bombs, it puts everything else in perspective. Everything else becomes trivial. And that has happened to me as a child. I had the unfortune to go through the revolution, and people were just blindly shooting at each other with nonsensical targets. So the army was shooting against the civilians were shooting against the military. And I was in a home that was on the first ground, and we would actually get bullets flying off of our window. So that was quite intense. And I'm starting to appreciate the basics, just being able to have a shelter, being able to have a roof, being able to have heat, and all of those things that are basic. So I came with that upbringing. And then on the other side, as Alina, the owner, the business owner, realizes that people have a job within their corporations and have started to have an expectation from their corporations, especially when their political system might not be stable or their governments may not take the right actions fast enough. They have started to look at their corporations and say, does this corporation align with my values? Does this corporation care about the things that I care about? Should I even be working here? Because typically their corporations are regarded as greedy, because they are all interested in profits. And at the same time, they employ people. There has to be an alignment between what the corporation cares about, what the person cares about, and being able to have the kind of corporate responsibility to do the right things when everything else around you fails to provide that kind of security. So I think that there's an opportunity in general, especially in 2022, for companies to show more empathy around the things that employees go through, because in this case, Everybody has some relationship with Europe a little bit to feel that tension, because it's not only Ukraine. Poland feels the pressure. Germany feels the pressure. The Western countries are feeling the pressure from this massive migration and the sanctions. So it's no longer indirect. It becomes more and more relevant to the discussions that employees have.
And I'm curious about specifically the role of tech, right? So at the time, when you're experiencing what you just laid out, were you also, you were also very passionate about tech growing up. We've had past discussions about that. Did you sort of see tech as the solution or as a part of the puzzle that could have been a solution to address the issues that you were experiencing that we're seeing again, in Ukraine?
When the information is restricted, like it's happening right now in Russia, it's hard, but it's still possible. Like the Ukrainian social media was hacked 14 hours ago, if I'm not mistaken, and people were exposed to the reality of things. It's a little bit harder because a lot of people in Russia have been constantly primed with the repeated message again and again and again to believe a certain kind of story, and not being primed with any other information. So all of a sudden, some social media being hijacked with one message, they might think, oh, it's just some occurrence of some kind. So it has to be repeated. It can be done, but it's very hard because the source has to be opposed. Obviously, we're caring for the victims here, but I wish I could do more on the bigger issue, which is how to prevent this from happening as well. And it's not always obvious how one can do that at the starting point.
So I want to also think about some things that other companies have been doing right too, right? I'm looking at a list here that Grammarly was donating its Russian profits to help support Ukraine efforts. Airbnb, right, was doing the short-term housing to Ukrainian refugees. Phone carriers like T-Mobile, Verizon, they were all providing access to their services. Uber was offering rides over the border between Ukraine and Poland. It seems like there is this response from tech, but I guess my question is, what does it take to get that buy-in? Because I know, Alina, you've expressed a bit of frustration as well about folks who aren't jumping to get involved in this, or maybe see it as a massive expense on the bottom line that they can't afford. What is your response to those tech leaders?
It's very, very, it's a very critical moment in time where you have to look deep into your soul and feel, is this moment where I put profits ahead of people's well-being, of people getting killed? And if a leader, even if in a corporation, chooses to be neutral in this case, it's not okay. I don't feel it's the right position that one needs to take in this, and the right message that sends to the world that I prioritize cash over people's life, and everybody should do their part, whichever way they can. So whether it's AstraZeneca and they still need to ship medicines that are crucial in Russia, which I think is correct, but they should donate all the proceeds from their profits of that to help the refugees. And I think it's the same for the tech companies. And look, okay, I might have some employees in Russia, or I might have some clients in Russia. How can I contribute and help in this particular case? Can I donate profits? Can I take care of others? Can I make sure that I'm doing all the possible things that I can to show that I'm a true leader?
Raj, we're talking about a specific event that's happening right now between Ukraine and Russia. I think about, I draw parallels in terms of people jumping to get involved, right? To after the murder of George Floyd, we saw a lot of companies committing dollars to support Black business. The COVID-19 pandemic companies were jumping to help folks with that as well. And again, we see sort of this momentum. We sort of see these ebbs and flows. How are we going to keep the momentum that we're seeing from companies that are helping in the Ukraine-Russia crisis in the future? How do you keep that momentum going?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's about investing in people at the end of the day, because as Alina mentioned, we're at a tipping point here. That right now the world is in a dark place. With with the pandemic, with conflicts, and now with climate change and everything else, which is going to, it's all compounding effects of human displacement worldwide. So Ukraine has been a specific event, and we will see more of these specific events going forward in some shape or capacity. But for the corporates now, the business leaders I'm talking to are all scratching their head as to what's going to drive the next generational growth. And we are now in the digital world. Everybody's connected, and as Alina mentioned, it's now putting the ethos and the responsibility back on those business leaders to really think about those people that they're investing in. What I do see is that I've been in the space of the refugee business for the last 30 years of my life, mentoring lots of refugees. My forefathers were originally from refugees themselves, from the Indian partition. So I've worked in the Middle East and here in the UK as well with refugees. And what I do see is enormous unbased talent, which is untapped. We are seeing a lot of individuals, particularly women, leaders coming up through the ranks. I was in Lebanon just last week talking to several women refugees displaced by the Syrian crisis, talking to them about how they're going through their pain and struggle, but at the same time taking the initiative to learn English, to learn IT skills. They're doing Google certificates and digital programs with Google together with AI learning, and they're learning. And guess what? They're getting picked up for roles for corporates. So there is a massive opportunity, I think, for corporate leaders to really realize that the world is changing. There's a new way of working, and that way of working is really, working together in a collective way, and to really, accelerate the path for these individuals who are displaced to bring their talent forward.
Raj, Alina, I appreciate you both joining me this afternoon to have this conversation. And again, also for sharing a little bit about all of the work that you're doing, the continued work that you're doing, again, on this specific crisis, but also to address the refugee crisis at large. So thank you for your time and discussing the role that tech can play.
Thank you, Brandon, for highlighting this.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.